I've been doing this podcast for over a year now. My original intention for what became this episode was to do something light and self-indulgent. The anniversary could be my excuse to just yap about some personal favorites. But as you can no doubt guess, we're well past the anniversary, and I'm going to be talking about more than just a few songs. As of recording, there are 114 Vocaloid voices that are or once have been publicly available for sale, and I am going to share with you my favorite songs for all of them. Before I get into the list proper, let me make a few notes about my criteria. First, this list isn't in any particular order. I want it to be interesting to listen to without trying to rank these songs. Second, it has to be a solo song. Other voice banks can sing in the harmonies, but the character I'm talking about has to clearly be the lead vocalist. Third, I'm not including the voice banks that are currently in Vocaloid beta, though I've got a few that started there like And Uge, and I'm not including unreleased or private voice banks like Akikoloid-chan. This list is already long enough. Fourth, I'm only listing one song per character, regardless of how many voice banks they have. Kaiyuki V2 and V4 will not get separate entries, and songs featuring a character's voice bank for a different software will not be considered. Ii's Chevio bank, Gumi Synth V, and Gekyaku's original Utao banks will not qualify. Fifth, it has to be an original song. Some of these have official alternate versions with other voice banks, but these are releases by the original producer, not covers. And finally, I try not to favor any one producer too much, but some people just use a wider variety of voice banks than others. I've only got one slot for Miku, and there's a lot of Miku-loving producers out there who just don't make the list. So, speaking of folks who don't feature, I'll be kicking off the list with the neglected Sandra, Naoki, and Kana. These are three of the default voice banks that come bundled with V6, and none of them have any original songs in which they sing lead vocals, except for the little ditties that Yamaha uses as demos. Sandra and Naoki have popped up as backing vocals for a few tracks, while poor Kana does not have one single entry on the Vocaloid lyrics wiki. May someone give them the love they deserve soon. Now, Kana was released at the same time as a male vocalist named Hayato. Hayato has one original song listed on the wiki, Accurate Silence by the producer Risho. I'd be lying if I said that I thought it would qualify as a favorite if it had more competition, but it's still a solid little tune with some neat industrial drums. Risho is actually the artist behind several V6 default entries on this list, mostly because he seems to be by far their biggest fan. This guy puts out new original songs at a genuinely astonishing rate, and though a lot of them aren't super polished, there's something to be said for single-handedly doubling or even tripling the number of wiki entries for several different Vocaloids. So, Risho gets credit for my entries for Matthew with Out of Time, Lucas with Faithless, Taku with I Thought I Could Fly, Michelle with Science Like You, and Ceremonial for Brian. I honestly don't have a whole lot to say about any one of these songs, but they're all definitely worth listening to at least once. I'll bring up one more of the default voice banks before we move on to more familiar names, and that is Yuina. My pick for her is Splitting in the Nines by Scarlet Candela, who also sometimes goes by Kuranai Akari. It's a nice, shoegazy sort of alt-rock song, with some very thoughtful lyrics about unrequited love and the struggle to maintain relationships while dealing with mental illness. Splitting in the Nines was written for the Soundwave Parade project, an LGBTQIA-themed album spearheaded by friend of the pod, Tulip. All of the proceeds from this album go to the Rainbow Railroad charity, so if you check out any of the songs on this list, it should probably be this one. Splitting in the Nines also features Mako rather prominently in the harmonies, and my pick for Mako's number one song is Break It by 11. This one isn't just my favorite Mako song, but one of my all-time Vocaloid faves, period. I think that anybody who's been in the Vocaloid space for long enough already knows that iconic Project Diva music video for this song, the one that has Mako singing while wreathed in flames in some strange industrial space. To me, though, this song feels like the epitome of a cold fury. It's a breakup song with genuine rage in the lyrics, but everything from Mako's tuning to the intricate bass line to the subtle synthesizers throughout feels careful and precise. Mako promises that she will destroy everything about her relationship that has proven to be worthless, but it'll be a controlled demolition and it will leave nothing behind. In general, I do gravitate toward rock music, so there's a lot of that on this list. For SFA2 Miki, I've got Theater Love Song by Nabuna. Nabuna is obviously much better known for his work with Miku and Gumi, but listening to this song makes me desperately wish that he'd use Miki more, because her voice is an incredible match for his style. This is one of his heavier tracks, with no synth lead and a snare drum that sounds like a shotgun blast, but Miki keeps the whole thing sounding nice and bright. And for all the noise, though, Nabuna is also a master of knowing when to pull back. There are moments in many of his songs when all of the instruments go quiet and the singer briefly stands alone before everything rushes back, and that moment in this song is just unbelievably satisfying. Miki only gets a few syllables out on her own, but it feels like all of the seething frustration that defines this whole song just narrows to a single point, and then it all bursts back with more life than ever for the last chorus. Another guitar hero of the Vocaloid world is Marvin Valentin, who wrote my pick for Micah, Incomprehensible. I'm a big fan of shonen anime, and I know I've mentioned my abiding love for Fullmetal Alchemist in at least one of my interviews. And this song sounds like it could be the opening theme for something just like FMA Brotherhood. I can perfectly picture the long tracking shots of the hero chasing after something, and the dramatic swoop of the camera when the chorus kicks in and a fight breaks out. The lyrics also have an angsty sort of Season 3 shonen vibe. Micah sings from the point of view of an angel who's trying to understand why humanity has to suffer, but it could also work really well as a hero lamenting the people that he failed to save. Marvin worked with several other people to create the song, including Ruklefia for the guitar solo, heavenly bass lines on the bass guitar, and Akupi for Micah's tuning. Akupi is himself the writer behind 2 of this list's entries. First, for Prima, we have Feel the Rain. This was the runner-up in Prima's category for the Voc America Song Contest, but with the greatest respect to the winner, who was actually Marvin Valentin, I personally like this song even better. Even though Feel the Rain is still best described as a pop song from like a structural songwriting standpoint, Akupi leans into Prima's operatic capabilities instead of trying to work around them, and the result is magnificent. The waltz time and the glitzy, theatrical synth strings provide exactly the right amount of grandeur for Prima's elaborate vocals, and the cello in the bridge is just gorgeous. My other Akupi pick is A World to Escape with Yume Minemu. Akupi has a real knack for ramping up the intensity when the chorus hits, even if the verses were already pretty vibrant and energetic, as is the case with this song. The toy piano in the bridge and the outro is probably my favorite part. It's a great match for a squeaky voice like Nemu's. There's also an English version of A World to Escape that was very nearly my pick for Cyber Diva. Since I decided in the end that I like Nemu's version a little bit better, my actual choice for Cyber Diva is Secret Garden by Empath P. This one's bending my own rules, since Dex takes lead vocals during the second to last chorus, but I love this song enough to make an exception. I still don't actually know all that much about the Flowerfell Undertale AU that inspired this song, and admittedly I've never even played the game myself, I've just watched some playthroughs and stuff. But the song gets enough of a story across on its own. I still vividly remember how excited I was when Secret Garden came out, because I'd only ever heard Empath P's piano ballads before. This was a whole new sound for her, and though it's still a really slow song, it feels downright electrifying when that last chorus hits and the key changes. Empath P, who also goes by Aki Glancy, was the voice provider for the V4 voice bank Dinah. My favorite song for Dinah is Pushing Daisies by No Straight Answer. It was one of her demo songs and later featured on No Straight Answer's album Syntech Plus. Dinah has a bit more power to her than Aki's natural singing voice, and you can really hear it during the big vocal jumps in the chorus. Interestingly, besides the original version demonstrating Dinah's voice, Pushing Daisies seems to be a popular choice for Utao demos as well. I found examples of it used for the releases of English voice banks for Rione Yami, Alice 16, Niton, Taizo Zekyu Koe, and Shelly, and I bet I'd find more if I kept looking. Somehow, No Straight Answer just hit the sweet spot with a vocal melody that's challenging enough to be useful as a showcase, but still sounds pleasantly simple overall instead of overwhelming. No Straight Answer was, of course, the voice provider for Dinah's counterpart, Dex. My choice for him is Honey I'm Home by Ghost, which is also the most viewed song for him. It is an absolutely terrifying song with an equally scary music video, and I mean that as the highest possible compliment. We all know how unique Ghost style is, but there's a didgeridoo synth in there. They went above and beyond to make this song sound completely different from anything else that I've ever heard before, with singularly fascinating lyrics to bring it all together. Industrial Catholic bug core forever. Ghost also contributed the vocal melody to my choice for Yohyoloid, the similarly Catholic-flavored Shadows Art by Vane. This song sounds like what you'd be forced to dance to in a nightmare about being jerked around on puppet strings. It sounds like the villain has the hero right where they want them, and they're going to be really condescending about it in a sexy, mocking sort of way. It sounds like ironic betrayal transmuted directly from pure emotion into sound. I could go on, but instead of listening to me trying to be clever and evocative, you'd be much better off just listening to this indescribably cool song yourself. I've got a few other horror-themed songs scattered through this list. For Jinwa, I've picked Yakushi by Peg. Yakushi is the Japanese pronunciation of a monster from Chinese folklore called the Ye-Go-Zi, which I really hope I'm not pronouncing like an idiot. It's a creature with a human body and the head of a beast that appears on battlefields to eat the brains of the dead. Peg's song has Jinhua singing from the viewpoint of the Yakushi herself, warning the listener that creatures like her are arrogant and loveless and can only ever spread despair. To believe that they can change is not only a hopeless delusion, but an obvious act of defiance against the natural order. She berates the listener to, quote, use your head and think, dumbass, which is ironic when the Yakushi claims that she's only here to eat your brains. It's all pretty clearly a metaphor for some very human self-loathing, but the song is anything but a downer. The tempo is upbeat, Jinhua's voice is bright and biting with some gorgeously aggressive growls and trilled R's, and the guitarist is absolutely shredding it from the first note to the last. Though Yakushi uses her Japanese voice bank, Jinhua was originally developed to sing in Mandarin, voiced by Taiwanese voice actress Wenyi Wang. Most Mandarin Vocaloids were developed in mainland China, though, which means that a lot of Chinese Vocaloid music is only officially uploaded to Bilibili instead of YouTube or Nico Video. This was and remains the language category for which I'm the least familiar, so I had to go out of my way to look for Chinese songs for pretty much all of these voice banks instead of coming into it with a favorite in mind. Also, I'll apologize in advance for any pronunciation errors. I have zero confidence with tonal languages, but I'll stick to translated titles where I can and do my best where I can't. For Yanhei, I picked out Far From the Waves by Wu Gui Sui. This song has some of the most unique lyrics of the whole list because it's a song about floods. One of the most important stories to China's historical and cultural identity is that of the Great Flood of Genyu, which the archaeological record shows did happen about 4,000 years ago, but which has since become a classic example of a national founding myth. Some versions of the story are full of a lot of fantastical, magical elements, but pretty much all iterations put a lot of emphasis on the heroic efforts to combat the flooding, and how the first Chinese dynastic state, the Jia, was born in the wake of this disaster as people banded together. That story is where this song starts. From there, it explores the relationship between the Chinese people and their fickle rivers through the millennia, referencing events from 4,000 years ago up to the disastrous flooding of multiple rivers in 1998. It's a fascinating story, and one that's well cited on the lyrics wiki with links to further info. So if you're looking for both an epic mix of Chinese folk instruments with a modern rock beat, and a fascinating Wikipedia rabbit hole to jump down, this is the song for you. A lot of the Chinese songs that I've liked best have had a similar sense of grandeur. For Lo Tianyi, I've picked Express by JUSF. This song feels like I walked in during the moment the heroes learn some awful truth in the second act of a musical that's set in a fantasy world inspired by the folklore of at least 8 different countries. The lyrics tell a crazy story full of references to both the cycle of reincarnation and classical Greek mythology, and there's some crucifixion imagery in there for good measure, because you might as well hit as many faiths as you can. Besides the lyrics, the music itself is epic. Just layers upon layers of flutes and strings and glockenspiels and a whole lot of ethnic instruments that I can't quite identify by ear. It's not a song for minimalists, but it's a hell of a ride. And for Stardust, or Xingqian, I picked the similarly epic Deities of Cathasia. This song had a whole team behind it, composed by Haixian Nian, or Seafood Noodles, arranged by Jiwang Zhou Ren Hezi, and with lyrics by Zhejiao Jiaozhu, and a whole bunch of guest performers to record the various instruments, which include rock and roll standards like the electric guitar and bass, and lots of Chinese traditional instruments like the guzheng, pipa, erhu, and bamboo flute. Cathay was a name that Europeans used about 1,000 years ago to refer to China. It then became a sort of fancy poetic nickname in English literature once they clued into the fact that China should properly be called, well, China. The name still pops up here and there, like the Hong Kong-based airline Cathay Pacific. Cathasia, in turn, refers to the landmass that existed about 300 million years ago. It was one of the pieces that would eventually form the Asian continent that we know today, and it included most of the land that is now Chinese territory. With that explained, the lyrics are basically a roll call of various figures from Chinese mythology. There are also references to the 15th century novel Investiture of the Gods, a highly influential Ming Dynasty story that interweaves fantasy and mythology with a romanticized account of the founding of the Zhou dynasty. Stardust sings as a sort of modern devotee of the gods. She seeks their signs wherever she may find them and pours herself into learning that history so that she may serve as a hero of Cathasia herself by keeping the story alive. Deities of Cathasia and Far From the Waves definitely got me sidetracked for a little while, but I had to research more than just the Chinese Vocaloids to get a song for every single character. For example, I didn't know any music with Unity Chan when I got started, but I found a great hard rock song called End of the World by Jay Markin. He notes in the video description that it's his first Vocaloid song, but the complexity of the composition makes me think that he definitely had lots of general songwriting experience beforehand. The music video is also super cool. It's a mix of real-life footage and sketchy animation that's all rendered in sepia tones. Toho Kozunka was another unknown for me. She doesn't have a lot of solo songs that are on YouTube, but I liked one called Camellia Demon by an artist called Mochi Mochi Okoku. I couldn't find a translation for the lyrics on this one, so I'm mostly just going off of vibes, but the vibes are pretty cool. The instrumental combines Mochi's usual heavy metal sound with a lot of traditional Japanese instruments, which I'm realizing is becoming a bit of a running theme there. Obviously, China and Japan have different rosters of traditional instruments, but their overall sonic palettes have a lot in common, at least in comparison to, say, traditional Celtic music. Regardless of the source, I always love hearing ethnic instruments paired with modern rock guitars, and that's as true here as ever. I think that the koto and the shakuhachi that you hear in this are synths, because it'd be a hell of a thing to play the koto as fast as you hear it in the bridge, but it sounds cool regardless. And then there's Gachapoid, who I wasn't all that familiar with because, honestly, he's kind of annoying. I know that that's sort of the whole point, having that boisterous kid voice, but it's not really my thing, which is why I was so pleasantly surprised by the song that I found for him. See, in 2013, 10 Star Records put out a compilation album called All Vocaloid Attack No. 2, full of newly recorded tracks featuring a mix of popular and underdog voicebanks and producers. The track from Mr. Ryuto Gachapoid was called Far Away, and it was written by Yoyoyupe. Yeah, the Leia guy. And he doesn't pull any punches here. This song would have been right at home on the Sick EP he did with Natsuki Karen. There's no official upload on YouTube or Nico Video since this song was an album-only release, but there is a fan upload on YouTube that I'll link to in the notes. I encourage you to check it out, and then maybe also check out Yoyoyupe's actual official uploads in the name of fairness. All Vocaloid Attack No. 2 also featured a song for Aoki Lapis by a producer who was going by Pipean P at the time, though he now goes by Zanio or Zanid. I didn't find this Lapis song. Turns out looking Pipean up on YouTube got me a bunch of non-Lapis songs, and also sewing tutorials for people who don't know how to use piping, or apparently to spell. But I did stumble upon something much more interesting. A song called While Money is Greater Than Zero by Agu Agu 11. One of the comments noted that the title is a while loop in Python and other coding languages, and while I don't know enough about coding in any language to confirm that, the lyrics do seem to be about somebody caught up in a destructive cycle, or, a loop, so that's pretty clever. The song is full of all sorts of weird samples. It reminds me a little bit of Haraguchi Sasuke's recent work, if he ever used Lapis instead of Teto, and also liked to mix his vocals to sound like somebody trying to call in from a dodgy phone connection. It's definitely not my usual sound, but it's too well put together for me not to like it. And speaking of samples, my pick for Sonica is Mechanical Angel by Pumpkinhead. This song came out after I'd already started researching and writing this piece, so there might be some recency bias here, but I've always really liked how Pumpkinhead uses Sonica. This song was created by piecing together a variety of pre-existing musical samples and loops, but Pumpkinhead did a really good job of mixing them and layering them in a way that sounds totally new. The lyrics are also a great mix of creepy and melancholy, which is a combination that I'm always down for. Sonica shares an anniversary date with fellow Zero-G voicebank Tonio. My pick for him is Other Side by Marvyanica. This was the winning Tonio entry for the Voc America Song Contest. Though, with the way that Voc America got ahead of its skis and then fell apart a little bit, it never got a performance at one of the shows. It's a shame it didn't, though, because it's a really good song, and I think that its fantastical lyrics would have been well matched with some weird lighting effects or cool color distortions, something wacky. My pick for Sweet Anne was also a Voc America winner, Saudade by Juni Pai. The word saudade comes from Portuguese and refers to a sense of melancholy, nostalgia, or longing. The song Saudade has definitely achieved this bittersweet feeling, exploring a relationship that has run its course and musing on how even the saddest parts of our lives generally have something to teach us. Juni Pai notes with some sheepishness in the description that he considers the mix pretty messy, but I like it. Sweet Anne has just the right amount of reverb to sound far away and wistful, and the guitar flourishes drift through the piano layers really nicely. My choice for Otamachuna is a very different flavor of the happy sad song, but it's equally worthy of the descriptor. I originally discovered Self-Defeat by Komeda Wara while I was researching for my Una episode, though at the time I thought that the title was Degenerate. Thank you, Firefox Translate extension, and also, what the hell. My own mistakes aside, it's a gorgeous song and I love it to bits. It opens with a simple acoustic riff and Una's vocals before jumping into a heavier electric sound that contrasted brilliantly with Una's bright, youthful voice. The tempo is easy, and the rollicking swing beat lends to the feeling of just sort of tumbling carelessly through life. You might make all kinds of mistakes, this song promises, but as long as you don't let it harden your heart too much, it'll all turn out alright. Several of my other picks came from other episodes' research as well. In my deep dive on Hiroshi, I mentioned his song Blue with Mayu. Hiroshi's guitar sound is usually the most defining feature of his songs, but my favorite element in this song is the synth melody that opens and closes the song as a solo and spends the rest of it nestled nicely in the middle of the mix. And while researching my Halloween episode, I found the fantastic and fantastically underrated Korean producer Compass Cat. Their song Cider Rain is my pick for CU. It's a bright, upbeat pop-punk song with surprisingly bittersweet lyrics about an old, seemingly lost friendship. The running metaphor talks about drinking soda together and trying to get it all down before the summer heat can melt the ice and flatten the sparkle. The overall impression is a little Kagero Project-esque. Not so much in the music style, which doesn't have a lot in common, but in the lyrics and the nostalgic vibe and the music video, which makes great use of a bright blue bass and some splashes of red when the final chorus hits. My Maknae family episode found me my pick for Maknae Petit. De la Mer Profonde is, despite the French title, a Japanese song by Momoshiro, which was created for the Maknae 7 collaboration to celebrate Petit and Nana's birthdays in 2018. The main synth riff has a fun sort of 1980s vibe, but they're countered with a darker electric piano melody that lends the song a hint of tension. It's a good contrast with Petit's cutesy voice, though I personally think that she's tuned to sound slightly more mature than her bassline in this particular song. I also really love the illustration for the video. It reimagines the iconic Maknae beret to look like a little jellyfish on her head. For Petit's big sister, meanwhile, I already knew what my favorite song was before I even started writing that episode. Nice to Me by Eggtan with Maknae Nana is a perfect example of Egg's talent for writing songs that can lift your spirits even if the subject matter is on the sad side. Nana's voice is at her most vibrant, and the bass line is rich and resonant throughout, though it's easiest to hear in the bridge. Described as, quote, a song about a girl confronting her own reflection, it really nails the way that sometimes you have to get out of your own head and look at yourself from a distance. Once you've taken that step back and come to better terms with who you are, that's when it gets a little easier to be kind to that person. I don't really have a clever transition for my next entry, so I'll just say right off that my pick for Arsloid is Decode by Nikki. It's another most viewed song, but I think that its status as Arsloid's number 1 is well earned. Decode was actually written to be a tie-in with a manga called Reset Game, and was actually part of a larger collab event between Vocaloid producers and Reset Game's publisher Ganma, which also featured 40MP and Kairiki Bear. I haven't read Reset Game, but I do plan to, and the only reason I've ever heard of it is thanks to this song, so it's certainly pulling its promotional weight. Decode is also Nikki's only work with a masculine voice bank, and it sounds good enough that I kinda wish she'd do more. However, Nikki is obviously best known for being the legendary Lily Master. I considered half of his discography for my Lily pick, but in the end, I had to go with Error. It was the first of his songs that I ever heard, and it still captivates me every time I hear it. I do tend to listen to covers at least as often as I do the original with Lily. There's obviously the famous Namine Ritsu cover, and there's so many singers and tuners out there who've put their own spin on it over the years. But nothing will ever change the fact that it was Lily's song first, and she still sounds incredible on it after all this time. And finally, to close out part 1 of this list, my pick for Gumi is a song that is itself about endings. Specifically, my favorite Megpoid song, and one of my favorite Vocaloid songs of all time, is Haibok no Shonen, or The Defeated Boy by Kemu, released in May of 2013. The Defeated Boy is the last song in the main part of the Pandora Vox series, Kemu's big storytelling project. Kemu has released some other related material since, but this is the ending that counts. I've never been quite as interested in the Vox story as some of the other big Voca series out there, like Kagero Project or Parties Are for Losers, but this song holds a lot of meaning for me that has very little to do with the other songs in the series anyway. Those are the songs that can get into the crazy fantasy elements about the well-meaning androids and wish-granting gone awry. But Defeated starts after all of that is over. The hero has failed at all that he once cared about achieving, and now he has to decide what to do next. It's one thing to pair darker lyrics with upbeat music. Vocaloid is famous for that. It's a trickier task to make your music embody a bittersweet balance of relief and regret and fragile hope for the future, but that's exactly what this song does. The melody is simple but powerful, with notably mature tuning for Gumi that can stand out against the driving, relentless guitar and drums. It's a song about failure, but it's also a song about picking yourself back up to try again. It's a song about accepting a loss with grace, and keeping love in your heart no matter what else you might lose. And above all, it's a song about hope. You may lose hope for a time, in the moment that you hit rock bottom, but you can always make the choice to grab hold of it again and carry it with you into the unknown. There is beauty to be found in a cold, dark night, and that's reason enough to keep on slogging through the mud, no matter what. That's all for now. There will be 2 more parts to this list, and I'll look forward to sharing them with you. In the meantime, take care, and as always, thanks for listening.